Hey guys, welcome back to Enlightened Turtle. It's your host Kev here. In today's video, we are going to be starting the new series of videos proper, and today we are going to be beginning our investigation during the period from 1200 BCE to 1000 BCE, from the Atlantic coastline along the Mediterranean to the Middle East, of which were dominated by several significant powers and rulers. Now, firstly, we need to document these variables as they may become more important further down the line. In the Hittite Empire, for example, which was in decline during this period, notable rulers included, I've tried pronouncing this name several times, I'm just going to put it on the screen because I will butcher it, the second, who reigned around 1207 to 1178 and was the last significant king of the Hittites, known for his battles against the Sea Peoples. Another important figure was Mursili III, who reigned around 1160 to 1140 BCE, and whose reign was marked by the empire's gradual disintegration. In Egypt, the new kingdom was transitioning into the third intermediate period, with Ramses, who reigned from 1107 to 1077, and was the last ruler of the new kingdom, and his reign saw the weakening of Egyptian power. Before him, we had Setenakht, who reigned from 1186 to 1184, and was the founder of Egypt's 20th dynasty, which marked the beginning of the last phase of the New Kingdom. He came to power during a time of significant unrest, likely following the death of Queen Tusret, the last ruler of the 19th dynasty. The instability was caused by initial conflicts, possible usurpers, and the external threats that we shall discuss. His successor, Ramses III, reigned from 1186 to 1155 and was one of Egypt's most notable pharaohs of the 20th dynasty. He is widely regarded as the last great king of the New Kingdom. Ramses III's reign lasted 32 years, during which he faced numerous challenges, including invasions by this external force known as the Sea Peoples. Despite these challenges, he managed to defend Egypt and maintain its prosperity for much of his reign. The Sea Peoples, who were a confederation of various groups, were active all across the Mediterranean. While they did not have specifically documented kings, they significantly impacted the regions they encountered, not just Egypt and the Hittite Empire, as we shall see. And we will look to break this down further in greater detail in the next video. But briefly, where did the Sea Peoples originate from? The Levant, the Aegean, or further west? Perhaps surprisingly for some, there is potentially a fair amount of evidence for a west to east migration around in the period of the discussed Trojan War in Britain, as outlined previously, to be found in archaeological, linguistical, and genetic sources, as well as numerous other indicators. This period, known for the Late Bronze Age collapse, saw significant changes and migrations in various parts of the ancient world. Through these videos, we shall outline potential pieces of evidence supporting such migrations. Firstly, archaeological findings in regions like the Aegean, Anatolia, and the Near East show evidence of material culture shifts that correspond with movements of people. For example, the appearance of similar pottery styles and artifacts across these regions signaled the introduction of new technologies and building styles in the Eastern Mediterranean during this period, which will be presented. Many archaeological sites in the Eastern Mediterranean and Near East, such as Hattusia, the capital of this once great Hittite empire, and Urgarit in the Levant, show evidence of sudden destruction around 1200 BCE, which some scholars link to invasions or migrations from the west. These destruction layers coincide with a broader pattern of social and political upheaval of the region. The spread of Indo-European languages and changes in their distribution patterns in this period shall be explored. For instance, the presence of new linguistical groups in the Aegean, Anatolia, and Levant suggests movement of peoples who spoke languages related to those we can find further in the west, not in the east. Recent genetic studies show evidence of these population movements during the Late Bronze Age. DNA analysis of remains from this period indicate that there was significant gene flow between the regions. For example, studies on ancient DNA from the Aegean and Anatolia have shown genetic shifts that suggest migrations or extensive interactions with populations further west. Historical records from the period, including inscriptions and text from Egypt, the Hittite Empire, and other contemporary civilizations, will be explored as some reference peoples or groups that could have migrated from the western regions. These records often describe conflicts and interactions with the infamous Sea Peoples or other groups whose origins are debated but might include migrations from this western Mediterranean and then later Aegean regions. In Etruria, western and central Italy, around 1200 BCE, the Proto-Villanovan culture emerged, marking the transition from Bronze Age to Iron Age. During this period, there was a notable shift towards more fortified hilltop settlements, indicating changes in settlement patterns and defensive strategies. For me, this is indicative of people arriving and erecting defenses for security in new regions. Burial practices also shifted, with cremation in urns becoming more common, which we have touched on in the past, discussed in the Iliad and found in the material culture of Britain. Although Etruria was not directly affected by the widespread collapse seen in other Mediterranean regions, it experienced significant cultural and social shifts that set the stage for the rise of the Etruscan civilization centuries later. The reason for this will become apparent. On the Mediterranean islands, major upheavals occurred. In Crete, several key sites, including the infamous Knossos, were destroyed or abandoned. This led to a sharp decline in population and the collapse of the once thriving Minoan and later Mycenaean palace systems. Similarly, on Cyprus, major urban centres such as Enkomi were destroyed, leading to a period of abandonment and decline in urban life. Some regions were later reoccupied but on a smaller scale, reflecting a significant reduction in population and societal complexity, and we shall touch briefly on this population decline in a moment. In northern Libya, the changes were less dramatic than in other regions, but there were still important shifts around 1200 BCE. This period saw increased population movements and interactions with neighbouring regions, particularly Egypt. The Libu people appeared in the Egyptian records during this time, indicating a changing dynamic in the region's population. While northern Libya did not experience the large-scale urban collapse also seen elsewhere, it also witnessed social and migratory changes, with groups possibly arriving and interacting more frequently with the outside world. One must ask the question why we find Phoenician linkage in Etruria and Libya. Again, this will become more apparent as we move forward. The Levant experienced profound changes also during this period, including the destruction of major cities like Ugarit, Hazor, and Megiddo. This destruction led to the collapse of larger city-states and the rise of smaller kingdoms, such as the early Israelite and Phoenician polities. The arrival of new groups, particularly the Philistines who settled along the southern coast, also reshaped the region's political landscape. These changes marked the beginning of a transition from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age in the Levant, with increasing political fragmentation and the emergence of new cultural groups and development of several key indicators that we shall outline. Moving from the islands of the Aegean, especially to mainland Greece, the collapse of the Mycenaean civilization was one of the most dramatic changes of the time. Major palatial centres such as Mycenae, Pylos, and Tiryns were destroyed or abandoned. The Linear B writing system used for administrative purposes disappeared entirely, highlighting the collapse of the administrative structure. The shift from centralized palatial systems to smaller self-sufficient communities allowed for greater resilience and population growth despite the fall of the Mycenaean civilization. The Peloponnese, a core area of Mycenaean Greece, was similarly affected by these changes. The major Mycenaean centres, as mentioned Pylos and Tiryns, were destroyed and abandoned, leading to the collapse of the palace-based political system. The breakdown of these centralized structures resulted in political fragmentation and the loss of complex administrative systems. This period also marked the beginning of the Dark Age in the region according to the mainstream, which allegedly was characterized by reduced literacy, less monumental building, and central decline in cultural and economic activity. However, this period sees the rise in Doric culture, which we shall expand upon further in greater detail than previously done. In Anatolia, around 1200 BCE, significant changes took place with the collapsing of the Hittite Empire, which had been one of the dominant powers in the region. The Hittite capital, Hattusia, was destroyed and abandoned as mentioned, and the centralized control of the empire disintegrated. Many of the major cities in western Anatolia, including Schliemann's Troy, also experienced destruction during this period. This collapse led to the fragmentation of political authority in Anatolia at large, with smaller kingdoms and city-states emerging to replace the centralized Hittite administration. The Luwians, an Indo-European people, became more prominent in southern and western Anatolia as new independent states formed in the power vacuum left behind by the Hittites. The breakdown of trade networks, the loss of centralized administration, and the movement of people contributed to the period of instability across the region, again according to the mainstream. In the western part of Anatolia, the destruction of Troy 7 is often associated with this period, although the exact causes remain debated. In southern Anatolia, particularly in the Cilician region, new political entities started to emerge, and the Luwian hieroglyphic inscriptions from this indicate the survival of at least some local cultures with external influence, despite the collapse of larger political structures. The coastal regions of Spain and Portugal, particularly along the Iberian Peninsula, marked significant transformations also. This period saw the influence of various cultures including the Iberians and the Phoenicians, who began establishing trading posts and settlements along the coast. The Phoenicians were particularly active in coastal trade and founded key settlements such as Gadea, or modern-day Cadiz, the home of Odysseus according to Iman Wilkins, and Malacca, modern-day Malaga, which became crucial centres for commerce and cultural exchange in the western Mediterranean. This area also saw the rise of fortified settlements, as we have seen in Etruria and Libya, which reflects a growing emphasis on trade, defence, and security amid increasing interactions with the Mediterranean world. In Morocco, the region experienced changes associated with the broader movements of peoples and cultures. The Berber tribes inhabited much of the interior of coastal areas, and by this time there was a growing interaction with Mediterranean traders. This establishment of trading connections with Phoenicians and other maritime cultures facilitated the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies. Coastal towns began to develop as trade hubs, marking a shift towards more organized and interconnected economic activity right across the region. In the Canary Islands, which were uninhabited by major civilizations at this time, the first human settlements began to appear. The islands were populated by Austronesian or North African groups according to the mainstream, known as the Guanches, who likely arrived from the North African coast or the Atlantic coastline. This period marks the initial stages of settlement and development of a distinct culture on the island. The Canaries remained relatively isolated from the broader changes happening in the Mediterranean, but the early inhabitants began to develop their own social structures and practices, which showed connections to this larger and broader Phoenician culture. These locations generally saw the beginnings of important ports that allowed for the trading of goods such as silver, tin, and other valuable commodities, which were vital for the economic networks of this time. These findings include remnants of Phoenician architecture, pottery, and inscriptions also. So this video was an introduction to some of the major players and locations that shall be the focus of this series of videos. Next, we will begin to build on the evidence of a Western origin of these influences. And like I say guys, as we move through these videos, I will begin to turn the screw and ratchet it up as we start to look more specifically at the evidences I'm going to try and present. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.